Survivor is an incredibly tough game. Not only do you have to deal with the elements of cold and or extremely hot days, but you're also hungry 24/7, getting weaker and weaker by the day. And not only that, but then you also have to deal with the other people on the island. And yeah, I couldn't imagine dealing with certain individuals on a regular basis, much less when I'm cold, tired, and starving. But you also just can't sit around all day and feel sorry for yourself. You have to do well in challenges, the strategy, and be sociable enough to be considered a good player. It's what makes Survivor such a great game, and why I have so much respect for all the players. And that's why I have even more respect for the older players of Survivor. Take what I just said and up it times 10 for older Survivor players. I mean, I'm a 21-year-old fit male, and sometimes I feel like my body's given up on me, and it takes every bit of me to get out of the bed in the morning on some occasions, and I've already become a caffeine addict, so I can't imagine what it must feel like for a 60-year-old living in the harsh conditions of Survivor. And not only do older players have it harder than the others in general, but they have a harder time making a deep run in Survivor simply due to the fact that they're an older player. It's such an easy thing to do to target an older player simply because they're going to be perceived as weak. And considering most of the time, the older person is 20 to 30 years older than the other older players on the tribe, it's obviously going to be hard to socialize and fit in. So the point is, older players have an extreme disadvantage when coming into Survivor. So today, let's give appreciation to some of the best 50 and over players in Survivor history. This list will be a combination of how well these players did in all aspects of Survivor, while at the same time, how memorable they were. Also, these will be players who were 50 or older the first time they played, not when they played years later. Before we begin, I want to start off with a few honorable mentions. Roger and Pascal are two of the more recognizable older figures in early Survivor, as both these two played very similar games. Both were lovable, both formed an alliance with the sweetheart of the season, and both essentially gave up their games for their young partner duo, and they were basically tied for 11th place. I also want to give a shout out to one of my all-time favorite players in Troyzan, who not only looked amazing for being 50 years old, but was the player behind one of my favorite Survivor episodes ever, and probably the sole reason why One World isn't my least favorite season. But despite my love for him, I just couldn't quite put him on the list. With all that said, let's get this list started with number 10. To start us off is Jane Knight from Survivor Nicaragua. Now, to be fair to Jane, she did have the advantage compared to other older players, as this season was old versus young, which made it easier for her to fit in with the tribe out the gate. But what makes Jane stand out so much is her personality and her challenge prowess. I think Jane is easily the most physically competitive, over 50 female in Survivor history. She won 2 immunities this season while competing against the likes of Fabio, Chase, and Benry. She had one of the most notorious rivalries in Survivor history with fellow big-time player Marty, as the two butted heads essentially all game, with Jane even turning on him to side with the younger players at the tribe swap. And of course, Jane was a massive personality in Nicaragua, and was quite the ambiguous figure among the Survivor fandom. She won fan favorite this season by a landslide due to her hard-fighting personality and being a relatable underdog. However, some people didn't like the way she treated Marty, and in general, she was very old school in the way she played, and couldn't take other people playing the game hard. And this was especially prevalent when her alliance straight up told her she was going home at the final 6.
By God, I started it, I put it out.
But still, no matter what you think of Jane, she was a complete shock of a character, as she certainly didn't fit the normal older lady stereotype we had seen in seasons past, and she was one of the hardest workers and players in Survivor history. A very fun run from an overall lackluster season. We're going old school now, and at number 9 is the first over 50 player in Survivor history to make it to the final tribal council, and that is Kim Johnson. Sure, Kim might not be the most entertaining player in the world. She may have been foolish to be in a 4-person alliance where she was clearly on the bottom, going up against 3 big guys. But my goodness, going back to my original point to start off this video, how did she survive in Kenya, Africa for 39 days? The conditions this season were brutal, even bringing a guy like Clarence to the brink on day 3, and fellow older player on Baran, Diane, completely fell to the elements. Yet, Kim was able to not only make it 39 days in Kenya, but was able to beat the Baran 3 Alliance in 2 immunity challenges that she needed to win, cementing her place in the final 2. As I said to start, I couldn't imagine being Kim's age, trying to survive the elements. Even more respect considering she's a woman whose body theoretically would give out faster than a man. With all of that to factor, I have to give respect to Kim Johnston, and she lands in my top 10. At number 8 is Scout Cloud Lee, someone who I think has actually somewhat been forgotten about in Survivor history. Now, while Twyla and Amy were really the first controlling woman in Survivor history, let's not forget about the impact Scout had on this season. She was casted specifically to be the sweet old lady on an all-women's tribe, and let's be honest, producers were probably hoping she would be an easy first boot to keep around more of the eye candy. However, Scout joined forces with Twyla, and the two formed the Older Women's Alliance with Amy that controlled the Yasser tribe. She was then the catalyst behind the biggest blindside of the season, and got the numbers on board to flip on Amy's alliance after being told she and Twyla were on the bottom. Out of all the people to take the power away from Amy, I don't think anyone thought it would be Scout, who would be the one to overthrow Amy's stranglehold on the game. Scout was able to make it all the way to the final 3, where she ultimately fell just short of the final tribal council. Scout on paper was a sweet old lady who would probably suffer the same fate as Janet in Amazon as an easy boot for the tribe, but she was able to ingratiate herself into the majority alliance throughout the game and was the brains behind Leanne's blindside, the biggest move of the season. I'd say not too bad of a run for someone expected to be the first boot of the season. The legendary Keith Nale lands here at number 7. Now, if any player on the list can say the elements got to them, it's Keith, as the guy pretty much made every wrong move you could imagine out there. And yet, he was still able to make it to the final 4. He broke his Firefighter Alliance trust with Jeremy right away, and was only able to make it to the merge due to even worse gameplay from Dale Wentworth. After being relegated to the bottom at the merge, it looked like his luck would turn around at the final 9, as John was going to be blindsided with an idol in his pocket. And, well,
I say stick to the plan. You know, at this point, that's all I can say.
Wow, John, stick to the plan.
I mean, literally the definition of you had one job. And to make matters worse, he had to use his idol and idled out his own son. But credit to Keith, he is one of the most reliable challenge beasts in Survivor history, as he won 3 immunities this season, and was so much of a beast that Natalie switched her vote from Alec to Keith just to save him, to have another challenge threat around to beat John. If you would have told somebody that Keith would be that much more of a challenge beast over Alec, they would probably call you crazy. Keith Nale is such a kooky and lovable guy, and it goes to show how great Survivor can be, that a guy like Keith can somehow get to the final 4, and for that matter, the final 5, 2 seasons later. Keith may not be the best all-around over 50 player, but he arguably takes the cake as the most entertaining. At number 6 is Carolyn Rivera from Survivor Worlds Apart. One of the most strong-minded women to ever play the game, the 53-year-old came into Survivor playing the game right away. She found an idol on day 1, ironically after the first dilemma of the season gave castaways a chance for an idol clue, with the only people who chose to go for it being on Carolyn's white-collar tribe in Hakeem and So. And with her and So being on the chopping block on night 3, she pulled off one of the more underrated ballsy moves in Survivor history, and held on to her idol when she knew her name was being thrown around to be the first boot. She then took control at the swap as she flipped to the no collars to vote against her former white collars in Max and Shireen, only to then flip on the no collars at the merge to join the majority blue and white collar alliance. Now, maybe you could call this bad gameplay, but Carolyn was always respected, and the fact that she was able to maneuver through alliances like this throughout the game so swiftly is really something to behold. She then had one of the most satisfying idol plays in Survivor history, as she idled out the hated Dan Foley. She won an immunity along the way, and was given a shot at fire by Mike, one of the few times where a player was given a chance at fire, despite it being a final 3. It just goes to show how great Carolyn was socially, that Mike was willing to take his chances against her, rather than the big-time personalities of Rodney and Will. It's one of the biggest crimes in Survivor history that Carolyn got the same amount of votes as Will, as she easily deserved the second place money, with some fans even saying that she played the best game in Worlds Apart. She maneuvered her way through the game so well, was well above average in all aspects of Survivor, to the point where it's hard to believe that she was her age when she played, as she played like a 33-year-old woman instead of a 53-year-old woman. Truly a great Survivor run. At number 5 is Tai from Survivor Ko Rong, who despite being so lovable, played one of the most ruthless games in Survivor history. He immediately was in trouble when he got caught looking for an idol on day 1, but was able to use that idol as leverage on the new Gondol tribe when Scott told him about the potential of a super idol. But then at the merge, his Guys Alliance was blindsided, and unbelievably, sweet old Tai joined forces with Scott and Jason, one of the most hated duos in Survivor history. And he didn't just join forces with them, he got involved in their antics as well. But then, in one of the best moments in recent Survivor memory, Tai flipped on Scott and Jason, refusing to give Scott the other half of the super idol in the middle of Tribal. Simply iconic. Tai continued to play hard, making alliances and finding advantages, but his game was simply too sloppy to be respected by the jury, and ultimately resulted in a 0-vote third place finish. But still, Tai played extremely hard for an older player, and was incredibly ruthless. But most importantly, despite his ruthless gameplay, he was still an absolute sweetheart of a man, loving the culture of Survivor, and of course, becoming friends with Mark the Chicken. These acts of kindness caused longtime Survivor fan Sia to give out her first ever Sia Award, which is now a staple in Survivor, handing Tai $100,000 for his actions in Ko Rong. It's so incredible how a guy who was awarded $100,000 by a megastar for his kindness was able to play so ruthless and aggressively at the same time, all while being over 50 years old. Tai is truly one of the most iconic players in recent Survivor memory, and played a super unexpected game from a 51-year-old gardener. Once again on this channel, we'll be talking about Yau-Man, as he lands here at number 4. But don't worry though, I won't be talking about the car deal. I'll be talking about everything great during Yau-Man's run in Fiji. In a cast full of recruits, Yau-Man stood out like a sore thumb among the cast, as he was one of the weakest links. But Yau-Man would go on to play one of the most dominating games by an older player in Survivor history. He and Earl were one of the best duos in Survivor history, as the two formed the majority alliance on the old Ravu and new Moto. Yau-Man was 53 years old and weighed like 100 pounds. Yet despite that, he won 3 immunities in Fiji, beating the likes of Earl, Dreams, Boo, and the Four Horsemen on multiple occasions. Also, Yau-Man just might be the most strategic player on the list, as he was in the majority all game, played the first ever idol with modern rules in Survivor history, and guaranteed himself a spot in the final 3 by making a card deal with Dreams, a genius move that unfortunately backfired on him. Oh god, I mentioned it. And my goodness, how can you not love Yau-Man, especially on a cast as nasty as this one? He was an underdog from the start, but was still able to dominate the game strategically, socially, and was a challenge beast, all while being a lovable guy who didn't have one bad word to say about anyone. Yau-Man is probably the best all-around old player in Survivor history, and just might be the most beloved as well. An absolute legend of Survivor. At number 3 is sweet old Janet Carbon from Survivor Island of the Idols. Now while players like Yao and Keith could give Janet a run for her money, I think most would agree that Janet is the most beloved older player in Survivor history. We all know about the moment that made Janet a beloved figure, but even outside of that, she was super kind to everyone, and won the Sia Award for her courage to stand up for others. But Janet wasn't just a sweet old lady. She found 2 immunity idols, became known as a camp and fire challenge beast right away, and due to this, was on her way to win the game. Unfortunately, due to a frickin' coin flip, Dean stopped Janet from being only the second 50 and up player to win Survivor, as had he not won an idol nullifier, Janet would have played her idol at 5, and definitely would have won the fire making challenge, which would have won her the game. Janet is the definition of being true to yourself, and not letting the negative assets about you stop you from being great. And it's a forever shame that we were a coin flip away from seeing Janet Carbon as a Survivor winner. Speaking of that 50 and up winner, at number 2 is the only winner in the group of 50 and older players in Survivor history, and that is Bob Crowley. Now, let's be honest here. Bob isn't exactly a top tier winner. In fact, most people have him in the bottom 5. But still, there's a reason why there's only been one winner out of the 48 50 and up players in Survivor history, and you have to give respect to Bob for being that one. I mean, he did start off the game by picking the dominant Kota tribe, and while he was at the bottom, he was certainly never in danger the entire pre-merge, which is obviously really good. And despite being a 57-year-old man that had his bones shown at the end of Gabon, he was able to win 3 clutch immunities and needed every single one. Then, he was able to beat Maddie in the Fire-Making Challenge and would ultimately be the first and only 50 and up player in Survivor history to win the game, beating Susie and Sugar in a 4-3-0 vote. Also, despite it not being a very good move, he was one of the first players ever to create a fake idol, which was not only revolutionary in Survivor, but resulted in one of the funniest moments in Survivor history. Bob's win, challenge dominance, and overall likable attitude added him another $100,000 to his bank account as he won the Fan Favorite Award. Again, with respect to Bob, he probably wouldn't be this high on the list if he didn't win Gabon, but the dude won Survivor, and although it was a pretty weak game in Survivor's wackiest season, you can't deny that in a way, Bob is a staple for all older Survivor players. At number 1 is a man who could be the father of some of the other players on the list, and the first true beloved player in Survivor history, and that is Rudy from Survivor Borneo. I mean, how could it not be Rudy? Is he the most strategic player in the world? No. Is he a challenge beast? Not exactly. Heck, I'm sure there's a lot of people who didn't like Rudy, as he said some not so great things out there that definitely would not go over well nowadays. But my goodness, was this man a Survivor icon? In a season where Mark Burnett wanted to show the viewers that anyone could win Survivor, it got off to a pretty bad start, as the other 2 older players in Sonia and Bibi were the first 2 players to be voted out of the game, and it looked like Rudy might be the third. However, Rudy was able to sneak his way into the majority, and would join forces with Richard Hatch, as the 2 would not only form one of the most iconic duos in Survivor history, but they would also be a part of the most iconic alliance in Survivor history, the Tagi 4. And Rudy really defined what Survivor was all about. He was in an alliance with someone who was 50 years younger than him in Kelly, and butted heads with her in the first couple days, and literally was never turning his back on a gay man in Richard Hatch, despite being very against that lifestyle. Rudy was absolutely hilarious, and did also show a bit of game awareness, as he was the one to gun for Gretchen at the merge, creating the take out the strong players at the merge mentality. Despite being 72 freaking years old, Rudy was able to make it all the way to the final 3, and was a blunder away from being crowned the first ever Survivor winner. May he forever rest in peace. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you are for whatever reason not subscribed to the channel, then what are you waiting for? Smash that subscribe button right now and drop a like as well. Also, leave a comment down below of your favorite 50 and up player in Survivor history, and if you think that you could survive on Survivor at 50 or above. With all that said, once again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.